Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome to the Computer Chess Championship season 14. So parallelly to this CCCC season 18, also this Computer Chess Championship is played now, and we have now two great tournaments in this top chess engine level, and I really enjoyed to analyze these games. I can always see new sidelines in particular openings. I can really see new improvements of particular openings, and that's why I really enjoy to analyze them. I hope I can help you out also in some particular openings. Today I wanted to show you really great gameplay by Lila C0 against Ethereal in the French defense Winawer variation, and the Winawer is of course the most dynamic of all of these French defense variations. And surprisingly, in this CCC season 14, Stockfish is only on the 6th place, which is of course a surprise because I expected again Stockfish and Lila C0 will play in the super final. Lila C0 is in the lead in this very nice tournament, but in this other tournament in this TCEC season 18, Stockfish is in the lead and Lila C0 is on the 2nd place. But in this time format, it's played 15 plus 5 seconds. Stockfish is not performing well. I'm not sure why, but it seems to me that these neural network based engines are simply better than the stable based engines. That's why we have now really sort of a neural network revolution here in chess. And as I said, Lila C0 was and is probably now the best engine in the world, and that's why I also like to analyze Lila C0's games and to be prepared. This is really something else. It's really incredible what Lila C0 did here in this particular game. It was a Winawer in which Lila C0 sacrificed 2 rooks and played really sort of an immortal Zugzwang. Zugzwang in chess is of course a position in which you basically have the disadvantage that it's your move. Basically in chess you want to be on the move, but when you're in Zugzwang position, every move that you make is basically a bad one. So Lila C0 really played here a great Zugzwang. Let's see now the game. We have now d4, e6, and after knight to c3, d5 and e4. It's intersposed now from queen's pawn game into a French defense game, and after bishop to b4 we have the Winawer variation of the French defense. Here we have the advanced line with the move e5 and now c5. Still common theory, of course. We have a3 played by Lila C0, and Ethereal simply takes, of course, like it's supposed to, because if you play something like bishop to a5, you risk some tactics with here the potential b4 move after c takes b4, knight to b5 with the knight to d6 would be very annoying already for black. So here, as I said, bishop takes c3, we have b takes c3, knight to e7, and now queen to g4. This is a common move from white's perspective in these types of positions. We want, of course, first of all to attack the pawn on g7, and if black tries to defend this pawn with castling, it's already risky, because you see this bishop's activity after potential bishop to d3 combined with the queen are simply too much to handle. I think after black castles with knight to f3, knight to h4, so many great attacking possibilities here for white. So that's why here Ethereal tried to counterattack in the center with c takes d4. And there is of course this main line to play the move bishop queen takes g7. Then of course rook to g8 will be the continuation of black, queen takes h7, and now maybe knight to c6 leads now into a more calm game, I think, because now of course both of the kings will stay in the center, but still black has here a compact position, can even try maybe to castle queenside in this particular line. So, but in the game Lila C0 didn't take this pawn. Lila C0 simply continued to develop the light square bishop. Very nice ideas here, and in the game queen to a5 was played, and now Lila C0 doesn't even care about this c3 pawn, which is really incredible. Played simply on a new improvement of the position of the piece, simply rook to b1, and here king to f8. There are now several choices how black could proceed here. Queen to c3 seems like a dangerous move, but it's really sort of a poisoned pawn here, because you get simply bishop to d2. You have to take the pawn, queen to a3, and now it's time to take the pawn, because we have now new activity with our pieces. Now the bishop is developed, this rook is in the game, so now we could, I think, take the pawn on g7 after rook takes g7, queen takes h7 again, and now after rook takes g2. Here is the problem. This knight comes into the game here after knight to c6, which seemed to me like a logical move here for black. Knight to g5 is, I think, game over immediately. There's no way you can protect this pawn on f7. You could try maybe rook takes g5, but after bishop to g5, you see this bishop's activity, this rook's activity on the b file, the queen's activity, still with possibilities to include this rook into the game. So I think black is simply lost. So instead of this king to f8 move that was played in the game, I've also analyzed this move knight to g6. It seemed to me also like a logical move to maybe protect now, but here h4, pardon me, is a serious threat. You would be forced to play something like h5 in order to block a potential h5 by white. So queen to g3 is of course a great idea. Now we can even try bishop takes g6 followed with queen takes g6, but after queen to c3, again this move bishop to d2. Okay, black can attack and again another pawn, but now f4 is here even a possibility, with possibilities even to castle, because probably black would play something like queen to f8 in order to get some kind of a defender in front of the king. But now we could simply play freely, naturally here with knight to f3, knight to c6 and castling. So if we evaluate this position now, it seems to me that this activity of white's pieces is simply too much to handle. The problem is you cannot attack this very active bishop with knight to b4. The bishop is covering that square very well, and still I think the main tactical threat here from white's perspective is to play something like knight to g5 followed with knight takes f7 and then bishop takes g6. This would be, I think, game over. Then after that, with possibilities even to crack the position with potential f5 moves. You see there is also some tension on the f file. So as I said, here in the game, queen takes c3 or knight to g6 wasn't played in the game. Here Ethereal tried king to f8. If you castle here, then you simply run into white's attack. This is also a common move from black's perspective to defend this way, but there is always this problem, and I believe Jan Nepomniachtchi lost a game in a similar position against Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, in which Jan Nepomniachtchi never had the opportunity to include this rook somehow into the game, and the rook connection in a chess game is a very important stage. So now you cannot connect the rooks. You see now in the continuation of the game how Lila C0 will play much more freely than black, although with down some pawns, but it's not about pawns here anymore. Here after the move king to f8, here knight to f3, it's very easy now for Lila C0 to find the best next moves, and we have now a knight to c6. So rook to b5 played by Lila C0 attacking the queen. The queen takes now finally the pawn, and we have now king to d1. Tricky ideas here by Lila C0, great moves. The problem is now you cannot play anymore this idea bishop to d2, you get queen to a1, so king to d1. But to be honest, I think this king is perfectly fine here on d1. It's not endangered at all, although it's also on a weird square. So we are having now a position which both sides didn't castle. King to d1 and now knight to e7. This is a necessary move, because if you play something like a6 here, if you try to kick away the rook, then you get bishop to b2 and your queen is trapped. So you need to create some breathing space for your queen. So that's why knight to e7 had to be played, and now h4. This is a common move in the Winawer variation. The main idea behind this move, it's not that you have created some space, because the main tactical idea is to play rook to h3 and then rook to g3. There is also a prophylactic idea about this move h4. The idea behind this move is to play, if the position allows it, the move h5, because in order to defend here, black could try maybe to create sort of a blocking system. How to do that? Black would probably need to play something like h5, g6, and then followed with knight to f5. Then the position could be compact on the king side. So that's why this move h4 comes with the idea to block this position with potential h5 moves by white. So we are not allowing black to play the move h5. If you played h5 immediately, it could cause you some troubles, because then you weaken the pawn structure immediately. But as a defensive strategy, as I said, black could try h5 g6 knight to f5. This could be a defensive idea. In the game, queen to c7, played by Ethereal, trying to get the defender back into the game, trying to include now many defenders, because Ethereal probably realized that there is really this huge bishop's activity. This knight is very well placed, the queen has a great activity, and now rook to h3, rook to g3 is of course the main attacking idea. a4, which came as a surprise to me. I've asked myself this question: why do you play now suddenly on the queen side? Because you have attacked now the king side. Why don't you play the move h5? And this is now really the difference between engines and humans. This move you can really understand if you analyze this game by some other engines. The main idea about this move a4 is of course to play the move bishop to a3, but not that it only is the idea to play this move bishop to a3. It's the idea to sacrifice the rook, and after potential a takes b5, the pawn would be on b5, and then you are never allow this knight to jump on this very active square c6, because this is the natural square for the knight. Of course, the knight would love to jump on c6 and attack here the pawn on e5. So if you try now immediately to play knight to c6, then you risk this move bishop to a3. The problem is now that you cannot take the pawn immediately, because you get pinned with queen to f4. You're forced basically to play the move f6. There's not another way how to defend this knight. So after the move f6, you get a very, very tricky move rook to c5. And where to go? If you go to d6 with the queen, then you risk rook takes c8 with the check, and with the discovered attack on the queen by the bishop, so you lose the queen. So the only way to keep the tension here is to play the move queen to b8, but it's again a lost game, because knight takes e5, queen takes, f takes e, and now rook to c7 wins the game immediately. So you see, knight to c6 so far not a possibility. Incredible thing what Lila C0 has prepared here. Let's go back. So instead of this knight to c6 move, Ethereal tried bishop to d7, attacking this very annoying rook, and here Lila C0 simply continues the attack, sacrifices the rook for the exchange, bishop takes b5, and okay, it seems to me, okay, Ethereal got rid of this very bad bishop, because in the beginning the bishop was blocked out by its own pawn. But now after a takes b5, we have a new position in which black has some troubles now to develop the knight, because the knight is not powerful, of course, so much on the square d7. It's better to place the knight on c6. Here again, black has now several choices after the move takes b5. In the game, a6 was played, and I asked myself the question now: why didn't Ethereal play the move queen to c3? Because there is now this move bishop to d6. It's really, really tricky, because it seems that you could maybe play something like queen to a1, which seems that it's white that is simply losing material. It's losing rook. But here, after king to e2, we have now, of course, the move queen takes h1, but now queen to g5, and you see now the problems. You cannot play the move knight to c6. So I'm not sure how far this calculation by Lila C0 are going on, but here you see it's already again a losing game. f6 is not possible, because we can simply take. If you escape with the king, we'll simply take, followed with some checkmate threats. If you try knight to d7, we'll simply again take, and then after this piece, then we can also take some pawns, even to have some checkmate threats on the 8th rank. So instead of this move queen to a1, black could try here the move knight to d7, but it's again a weak move, because rook to h3, as I said, as a main attacking idea, is causing now so many troubles for black here. You could try maybe to defend with the move rook to e8. It seemed to me that this would be sort of a logical continuation, but now you get simply knight takes d4. This knight comes very active into the game now. After queen to a1, king to d2, here king to g8, and now we have the move, as I said, this preventing idea, never allow black to defend with the move h5 himself. Now h5 by white, and here we have g6, but now comes a very nice move, queen to h4. You want to use, of course, the dark squares on the board, because now it's obvious that black has really some dark square problems. So queen to h4. Here in the game you could try knight to f5, but now bishop takes f5 after e takes f5. We have now a new tactic. You can pause the video and try here to find the best next move in this particular position. This wasn't of course played in the game, but here Lila C0 has again a great tactic. Knight takes f5. Here after g takes f5 you get checkmated with queen to g5. Another tactical threat is maybe after knight takes after knight takes f5. Here if you try knight takes e5, it seems that black has defended, but now comes really an aggressive move, knight to e7. Wherever you go with the king to f8 is not good. You risk some discoveries by the bishop on the king. You would be forced to play something like king to g7, but now h6, and again you're forced to get in front of the bishop, and knight to d5, it's game over. So you see, this was all after this move queen to c3, which seemed to me as a logical move. Because when I ever analyze this game, I ask always myself this question: what would happen if black plays this? So of course I cannot cover all of these potential lines that can happen in this game. I tried really to cover as many of the possible lines. You see, queen to c3 is not such a powerful idea. Here in the game a6 was played by Ethereal, trying to get at least some kind of an activity with this rook, which was a good defensive idea, at least I think, to get maybe the a file open and include this rook somehow into the game. We have now this idea, bishop to d6, queen to d7. Ethereal is trying to stay with the queen on the 7th rank because it probably felt that something will happen on the 7th rank. And now rook to h3, as I said, the main attacking idea. We have a takes b5, and now rook to g3, attacking this pawn on g7. We have now g6, and now queen to f4. Again, we are trying to use the dark squares on the board, because with the move g6, Ethereal has weakened the pawn structure too much with this bishop. Now we have new targets, of course, queen to h6, queen to f6, of course. So this is simply too much to handle, I think, here for black. So in the game king to g8 was played. We have queen to f6, and we have now queen to e8. Here Ethereal simply leaves the defense of the knight. Knight to c6 seemed to me also like a logical move, why Ethereal didn't escape from this attack. But now you get simply bishop takes g6. Great move. After h takes g6 you have rook takes g6, another sacrifice. You see what kind of tactics here Lila C0 has prepared. After f takes g6, queen takes g6, and after pardon me, it's not the point to take the pawn here on g6. Queen to f8 is the forced checkmate sequence. Here after king to h7, now we have a checkmate, knight to g5. So after the move sorry about that, here after move queen to g6, black could cover with the move queen to g7. So that's why here queen to f8 followed with knight to g5. So great attack here after the move queen to f6. Ethereal simply played queen to e8, and Lila C0 simply pushes forward, tries to split the pawns in front of the king. We have knight to d7, challenging the queen, and now finally queen takes e7, and now bishop takes e7. Here we have already the problems of the position. As I said, we have now really an immortal Zugzwang position. In order to make something happen, to create some kind of breathing space, you would need to play the move f6. This is not possible. That's why this h5 move was very important by Lila C0. You see, if you play f6, then you risk h takes g6, followed with rook takes g6, and it's again game over. So that's why b4 here played by Ethereal, trying to somehow maybe open some files for the rooks. But now after bishop to b5, we have rook to a1, king to d2, and now knight to b6. We have now h6. Here the king and the rook are really out of game. Incredible position here what Lila C0 has played here in the game. We have d3, we have knight to g5. Here we have d4, we have rook takes d3, and knight to d5, and now rook takes d4. Here is the problem. After the move rook takes d4, the problem is you cannot take, of course, the bishop. Rook takes d8 is immediate checkmate. So that's why Ethereal brought this rook back on the 8th rank, and now we have rook takes d5 anyway. played by Lila C0, sacrificing the piece, and now after e takes d5 we have a monster move, bishop to d7, restricting this rook's ability to attack these bishops. You see this rook is also out of game. This rook has only the a file. Okay, have your fun on the a file, but now it's time to checkmate you. b3 was played. We have e6. If you take, then of course bishop takes e6 is checkmate. That's why f5 had to be played, but now bishop to b4. We have b takes c2. We have d2, pardon me, e7, again with the same preparation to play the move e6. We have now c1, the promotion. Here you have some checks, but not a problem. It only prolongs the game for a while. After the move b5, here Lila c0 played bishop to e6, and it's checkmate. So great Zugzwang motif here by Lila c0, really paralyzed the Ethereal pieces all over the board. This was really a boa constrictor game. I was very pleased to see such a game. Great attack, great positional elements, great tactical elements. This was for me so far the best chess game of 2020. I hope really that enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I really like this kind of games, and this was really incredible gameplay by Lila c0. So okay, if you want to see more games like this, you can check out my other commented chess games played by computers. Here's the link, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time with some best chess games played by humans, and you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Thank you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.